previous session, we discussed how perceptions of a product changes depending on who endorses the product. So, look, every marketer knows that people perceive more positively and trust a message more when respected influencers endorse it, which is why tools like BuzzSumo offer influencer outreach modules and digital marketing agencies allocate large resources to reaching out to influencers. But why are influencers so important? Why are we still influenced by people we perceive as authorities in their field? How much influence do influencers actually have on us, their followers? And is paying influencers to sneeze about our brand or product worth it? Okay, let me start by saying once again that all in all we think ourselves to be the masters of our own minds. In fact, we are so confident in our ability to decide the quality of a product based on its features, price, quality and so forth. Yes, we really do tell ourselves that we are too smart to be influenced by the biased recommendations of other people. However, unfortunately, this perception is just another lie we tell to ourselves. In reality, there is no doubt that we are influenced by celebrities endorsing products or by influencers sharing, liking or promoting articles or products. In fact, psychologists Lee Ross and Richard Nisbett, in their book The Person and the Situation, explain that, I quote, "Arguments produce more attitude change in the people who read them when they are attributed to well-regarded, that is attractive, trustworthy or expert, communication sources, than when they are attributed to poorly regarded sources." So how much effect do influencers actually have on our decisions? How far can an influencer go before we decide that enough is enough? And can we prevent ourselves from being influenced? Well, let's go back to Stanley Milgram and discuss his famous obedience to authority experiment. Milgram was looking to understand the extent to which authority figures impacted people's behavior. Using newspaper ads and direct mail, he recruited hundreds of people from diverse backgrounds. The cover story was that people would be taking part in some studies that were looking at the impact of punishment in the learning process. The first experiments were carried out at Yale University. Milgram created a situation where unsuspecting participants were being asked to gradually increase the electric shocks they were applying to a so-called learner. Unknown to the participants, the learner or the victim, whatever you want to call it, was part of the research team. Several conditions were tested, including a remote condition with the learner or victim placed in a separate room, but still allowing the participant to hear the kicks on the wall, presumably caused by the pain inflicted on him. Basically, you, the unsuspecting participant, apply electric shocks to the so-called learner who is in a different room. While doing so, you hear him kicking the wall in pain. In another condition, voice feedback, the victim was still located in another room, but this time vocal protests were introduced as well. Basically, the participant could hear the victim begging for the experiment to be stopped. Other conditions tested were proximity and touch proximity, where the victim was in the same room, close to the subject, and even touching the participant. The participant was acting at the commands of a lab technician who was wearing a grey technician coat. The technician clothing, attitude and association with the University of Yale gave him a perceived status of authority, just like an influencer really. Of course, both the victim and the technician were part of the research team, and they were both very good actors playing their roles in a very realistic manner. The victim in particular was very well trained, and the so-called victim managed to mimic brilliantly the pain and anguish associated with the different levels of shock received. So, participants were being told that the researchers were looking to understand the impact of punishment on the learning process. The participant was supposed to teach the victim a learning task. Hence, every time the victim gave the wrong answer, the technician would ask the subject to increase the level of shock applied to the victim. The aim of the game was to assess how far the subject would go in obeying the technician, despite the screams, pain and the victim's request to stop the experiment. Many factors were tested. However, it is beyond the purpose of this session to get into every single detail. So, how far did the participants actually go with the shocks? For how long did they obey the technician in increasing the shock levels? Well, in the remote condition, when the learner was in a separate room, 65% of the people obeyed the perceived authority and went up to the highest level of shock available. Just to make sure you understand this, guys, out of 10 participants, for example, almost 7 of them went to the maximum level of shock they could apply, just because a perceived authority told them to. In the voice feedback condition, when people could hear the learner screaming and begging to end the experiment, well, 62.5% went along with the experimenter. Basically, you hear the learner who is in a separate room screaming and begging you to stop, and yet 6.25 people out of 10 still obeyed the technician, going to the highest level of shock. In the proximity and touch proximity conditions, only 40% and 30% respectively went along with the so-called technician. In brief, the closer you are to the so-called victim and the more vividly you see his pain, the more you go against the authority and the more you refuse the shocks. Of course, just keep in mind a very important thing. It was not authority per se that made the participants obey. It was the perception of authority provided by stuff like University of Yale setting, the technician's code, the technician's control of the experiment, and the technician's confidence. Right, interesting findings you may say, but how does this apply to digital marketing? Well, digital marketers encourage business owners to build a presence on LinkedIn, Facebook or Reddit, answer questions on Quora and so forth. The idea behind growing your social is that it drives traffic to the website and it builds the website its signals. During my career, I met many mediocre self-made experts in various industries, and I know so many more. These so-called experts are perceived as authorities based on their significant online presence, even when the content presented is well beyond the quality you would expect at their level. For example, I once employed a popular LinkedIn SEO influencer that provided my team with an expensive but easily to forget lecture on SEO. During his presentation, he showed no understanding of current principles, SEO issues and tools, or the real impact of machine learning in search and many more. But of course, this guy talks at conferences and he's a very active person on Facebook and Twitter as well. So yes, he does generate quite a bit of noise. In a nutshell, as shown in the Milgram experiments, the appearance of authority or expertise in certain conditions sufficient for confident behavior to be wrongly associated with actual expertise. Hence, behaving as an influencer or the appearance of being a thought leader will often be more sufficient than the actual expertise. Thinking back at Milgram's experience, because I and my team were in the remote condition, that is, we did not know the influencer, we associated his status and online presence with expertise. As a result, we bought from him the face-to-face lecture. However, as we got closer, which is the proximity condition, we became less influenced by his status. He certainly was not invited again. Let me explain this a bit more. In an experiment described by Chabris and Simons in their book The Invisible Gorilla, groups of 4 people who had never met before were asked to solve several math problems. Every participant was first asked to take a personality test measuring how dominant they tended to be. Researchers then recorded and closely analyzed the solving sessions. They found that people with a more dominant personality took the leadership of the groups they were in, even though they were not more expert or more competent than the other group members. The super interesting finding, though, is that most of the group members rated them as more competent than they actually were. So the question is, why did they end up being leaders or influencers within their group? In the words of Chabris and Simons, I quote, "The answer is almost absurdly simple. They spoke first. People with dominant personalities just tend to speak first and most forcefully. If you offer your opinion early and often, people will take your confidence as an indicator of ability, even though you are actually no better than your peers. You always experience this through life. Incompetent bosses who talk their way into a job, group brainstorming sessions hijacked by the so-called leaders, confident influencers and professionals who are everywhere online with nothing to say, and many more. Of course, this is one powerful lesson you can leverage if you are a marketer who is looking to leapfrog the more experienced influencers in your market. The mere appearance of you being an influencer can be as strong as actual expertise. Like the seasoned but mediocre SEO consultant, you can talk your way into it. In this case, confidence is incorrectly associated with expertise. Just something for you to keep in mind when competing against more established influencers. Milgram studies, while shocking, also gives us an idea of why we go along with what influencers or perceived authorities say or do. We often trust and believe the recommendations provided by influencers, but when John Doe provides the same recommendations, we most often dismiss them. In the words of psychologist Paul Bloom in his book How Pleasure Works, I quote, "Other people's actions are driven not by how the world really is, but by how they think the world is." So, focusing on growing your network with quality connections rather than quantity is essential for leveraging social media as a growth strategy. Using automated tools exclusively is therefore not indicated. Many people fall prey to the promises of fast growth, and the detailed filtering offered by these tools helps them in this illusion that they are growing their accounts with the right audience. I mean, hey, you can follow or invite only people who have profile images, who posted a number of posts in a certain period, who posted comments, or who have a certain number of followers or friends, or you can choose them based on keywords and so forth. However, automation alone will never deliver the engagement you are looking for. While people may accept your automated invitation or follow you in return, they will not do so because they love your product or content, but as a polite gesture, just returning the favor. Or they would simply try to get access to your first and second degree connections. This is generally just about where their level of engagement stops. In conclusion, more is not always better. This is particularly important on social media platforms like LinkedIn, which is limiting the number of invitations you can send. So use your invitations well, go for quality and well-connected people, and gain access to their first and second level networks. This will benefit the reach of your product and content significantly more. Christakis and Fowler also explain that if influencers are to be successful, one more ingredient is needed, and that is influenceable people. This seems obvious, of course, but many marketers forget this aspect when choosing audiences, whether organic or paid on Facebook, LinkedIn, and other. If you are looking for proof, just have a look at your email inbox or monitor your search experience. And think about this: how many automated emails or display ads do you receive from websites you visited without engaging with them? Or how many times have you reached a website and got immediately hit with a pop-up offering basic information or lead magnets that you don't really value? Okay, we're stopping here, but thank you for watching and I will see you soon.